Hello, everyone. Tad Hargrave here from Marketing for Hippies. I'm here with my colleague, Danny Inney. We're talking about this new book. When did this come out? Just last week?
Well, as we record this, it came out yesterday.
Okay.
So depending on when people watch it, it came out recently.
It's April 24th today, so April 23rd this came out. I got an advance copy, and I read it, and it's very, very good. And, perfect timing to talk about online courses, because a lot of folks are now having to, pivot, change, adapt their businesses because they can't do the in-person thing anymore. And people who are already in the online space but maybe hadn't built an online course, which is what this book is about, Teach Your Gift, how coaches, consultants, authors, speakers, experts create online course business success in 2020 and beyond. So a lot of people are starting to think about this, creating an online course, and there's a lot of ways you can do it right. There's a lot of ways you can do it wrong. And I don't think there's anyone in this space I know who I trust more on this than Danny Inney in terms of his acumen and expertise, and also just sheer experience of working with thousands of people and helping them get to a place where they can actually get online. So, Danny, very good to have you here.
Tad, it is my pleasure and my privilege. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the kind words. It means a lot.
Yeah. So I wanted to do this interview to kind of give a real 30,000-foot view on this whole online course business, because a lot of people are thinking about it, and it's, for some people, probably a really good idea. For some people, maybe not such a good idea. But for those of you for whom it is a good idea, I wanted you to hear it straight from Danny, just kind of the state of the industry, where things are at, his thoughts on this. And so, Danny, the thing I want to start with is what, over the past 5 years, what have you seen change in this online? I mean, of course, there's this pandemic now, so people are, going online en masse in a way. But I'm curious, over the last 5 years, what have you seen change in this industry?
Well, so it's interesting because this pandemic hasn't changed much. It's accelerated a lot.
Right.
So over the last 5 years, we've kind of been in this transition period from the early days of online courses, which were kind of 2000 to 2015, where it was this shiny, brand new space, very nascent, very unregulated, lots of loopholes. Everyone who was buying stuff was very much the innovator, early adopter profile, who tends to be an impulsive and forgiving buyer. It's the same profile of people who tend to order a lot of stuff on infomercials, or if you have a closet full of stuff that you ordered on Kickstarter, you're an early adopter or an innovator. And that was a great time, but that's not how most people operate. A good analog is to think about the smartphone market. So the first smartphones were big, heavy bricks that had a battery life that lasted, I don't know, half an hour. And they ran 4 apps maybe. And they cost a fortune. And innovators and early adopters were okay with that. Today, we expect like a small, light form factor, a long battery life. We expect it to run 1 million different apps, and we expect the price to be reasonable. And that's kind of the expectations of mainstream buyers. And that's kind of the world that we're in, accelerated by the fact that everyone is suddenly online. So over the last 5 years, we saw a kind of polarization where this world of monolithic online courses kind of split in 2 directions. One direction was information. At the time, everyone used to talk about info products. I hated that language because it's just not accurate in terms of helping people understand what we're doing. But one side really did split in the direction of information. And when you think about what information really is, think about the analog example, which the archetypal information product is a book. Right? And so, imagine you go to a bookstore, you find the book that purports to have the information that you want, because you don't know for sure until you go through it. You take it to the register, you pay for it, not a lot of money, because it doesn't cost very much to replicate information. And once you pay for it and you walk out of that store, nobody owes you anything. Not the author, not the bookstore owner, not the publisher, right? You're on your own. You got what you paid for. And if you do something with it or not, that's your problem. And books are good for a lot of things. They're not good for other things, right? Books are great for broadening our horizons as to what's possible. They're great for integrating new knowledge into existing expertise, but they're not great at imparting competence, right? We don't get good at things by reading books. We learn about things by reading books. If we want to get good at things, we need something more involved. That's where we look at the other side of that split, which is real education or transformation. And the analog version of that is a university course. Now, it's not a perfect example because the university world is a little bit messed up, but by and large, right, you enroll at a course at university, you are going to spend a lot of money, and that's partially because of market forces and educational inflation, but it's largely because it's expensive to deliver a meaningful education. You've got to pay the professor and the teaching assistants and the infrastructure and all that. And you could register and then never show up and nobody will care. But if you register and you show up and you do the work, it is reasonable to expect that the institution behind this course will do their part to help you get to the finish line. So your success is a shared responsibility of both parties.
Yeah.
Right? Now, if we look at how this split shows up in the world of online courses today, there's a lot of courses that are kind of information only. They're learning about things. They're kind of in the edutainment category. And that's where you have low dollar courses, $50, $100, $150. That's what you find on places like Udemy and LinkedIn Learning and Masterclass, right? And they tend to be short and focused. The production quality is getting really good. You might have a great celebrity instructor. And that is a very competitive place in which an aspiring course creator might try to get into. It's very hard, right? If you're an aspiring screenwriting instructor, you want to teach people about screenwriting, and you say, well, I want to create like $100 course that's like mostly information. You're competing with Aaron Sorkin, who wrote The West Wing and A Few Good Men, and you're competing with the distribution and production budget of Masterclass. So it's like, that's a no-win proposition. You're not going to win that fight. But on the other hand, if you look at, and it's a very saturated space at this point, there's a lot of information only stuff out there. But when you go a level deeper and you look at transformation, there is still a real gap in the market in a lot of areas. That's where there's a real need, right? So if I'm the aspiring screenwriter, I want to get good at screenwriting, I can take Aaron Sorkin's masterclass, and it's interesting, and I learn things that are anecdotal from his experience, and it's entertaining. And maybe I come out of it knowing something I didn't know before, but I don't come out of it a better screenwriter than I was.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I say, well, okay, where can I go to really develop my skills as a screenwriter? And Aaron Sorkin's not available to help me because he's busy writing his next project. So that's where there's an opportunity for someone who says, maybe I'm not Aaron Sorkin, but I'm very good at what I do. And I'm not going to just give you a bunch of videos and say, good luck, you're on your own. I'm going to work with you. I'm going to give you feedback. I'm going to help you get good. And yeah, it's going to cost more. We're talking about maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars, but it's worth it because you come out of it with a real skill and with a real outcome. That's the real opportunity in most of the course landscape today.
Thank you so much. I'm curious who you would say that online courses are for and who they're not for.
Are you referring to the consumer or the producer?
The producer, yeah. For the people who are thinking, maybe I should make a course. I imagine there are people out there where you would look at them and you just say, "This is not for you."
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's two angles to look at that. One is like, what does it take to be able to create a good online course? And the other is, what is the kind of business that a course can fit into well? So in terms of creating a good online course, the one real kind of line in the sand is legitimate expertise. Right? Like in the early days of online courses, this actually wasn't true. It used to be a truism to say that, if you read 5 books on a topic, you know more about it than anyone but a real expert, so you're a de facto expert. And this was always offensive to real experts. And I always thought that, there's a difference between reading 5 books and really understanding what's in them. But you could, unless you were dealing in a sensitive area, if you were like dealing with healthcare or working with children, you couldn't do this. But early on, you actually could read 5 books and create a mediocre online course about something, and it would do okay because there was nothing else. Mm-hmm. That's not the world we're in right now. So you have to have legitimate expertise. Now, that doesn't mean you need to have a credential necessarily, but you need to be able to answer yes to the question, can you legitimately, confidently help people who need support in this area? And if the answer is yes, there's got to be something in your background that led to that yes, right? You didn't just wake up one morning knowing how to do things, right? You had a series of training, experience, things that you went through that led to that ability. So you've got to have that ability, and you've got to have the backstory that led to that. That's what it takes to be able to create a good online course. Like, you've got to have the expertise to go into it. In terms of what sort of business should look at creating an online course versus what shouldn't, we want to think about how does the online course fit into the business? And there are a bunch of different ways. So the classic example is that the online course is the offer. It's like, this is what I sell. Instead of selling whatever else, coaching, consulting, widgets, I'm going to sell online courses. So you create your online course and it's really valuable and it's transformative. People pay you a lot of money for it. That's your business. And that's okay. That's what a lot of people want to do, and that's great. That doesn't work in every business, right? So if you're a coach or a consultant or a speaker or an author or an expert, that could work really well. If you're a sushi shop, maybe that won't work very well, unless you decide, I'm tired of selling sushi, I want to sell courses instead, right? Which maybe you could do. But let's say you have a business and you like your business. You're like, how does this fit into what I'm already doing? So there's a bunch of things you can do. The first thing you do is you want to plot kind of a journey of the life cycle of the person that you work with. So from the moment where they kind of get on your radar, you get on theirs, there's a whole length of time before the point of purchase. And so an online course can support that journey,
Totally.
right? In order for them to be ready to buy from you, there are things they need to know and understand and believe. And an online course could be a good vehicle for imparting that. So it's not about selling them the course, it's about the course selling them whatever else it is that you do.
Could you give an example of that?
Sure. So let's say that I'm an osteopath. Before someone's ready to come work with me, they need to have a basic understanding of what osteopathy is. They need to have some kind of belief in its efficacy, some kind of belief in its relevance to their particular condition, and some knowledge of you and why they should trust you, right? That's just off the top of my head. So, let's say you're an osteopath who primarily works with people who have back pain, right? So you could produce, instead of like all this complicated marketing, trying to convince them of things, you could produce a really simple online course. And this is where there is an opportunity for information online only courses, because you're not trying to sell it, right? It's to sell other things. But you could produce a course that is, 5 days to reducing your back pain. And you give them some exercises, you give them some things that they can do. They feel better over the course of the course. And as you do that, you're also helping them understand, okay, what is osteopathy? Why does this work? Right? How does this relate to your situation? How can you tell whether you need to work with a professional? And at the end, it's like, and if you want to work with a professional, here's my information. So that's a for example.
Yeah, I made a video just recently about this idea of creating like a prep program for all the body workers out there, because you can't right now do the work with people. But my guess is there will be other situations or pandemics where people can't come and see you. But yes, if you can put down the modality for a second and stop obsessing about your modality or combination of modalities, and first then think, well, yeah, what's the issue? There's a woman I spoke with, and she does Ayurvedic nutrition. That's the modality. So, that's the kind of thing that could be done just over the phone. But really any physical modality could have this. But when I asked her, and she came to me with niches that were all too broad and not that useful. And finally I asked her, so what got you started in this? And she said, oh, I had fibromyalgia really bad and nothing else worked. And this was the thing that got me over the hump. And I was like, well, couldn't you put together a package on this? So she could create a package, a 10-day program. And as she's walking you through it, saying, okay, so day one, the first thing we're going to do is take out all the obvious inflammatory things in your diet, alcohol or whatever it would be. And the promise could be very modest. It could be like, look, of course, takes a personalized approach, but there are some really easy things you can do. So every day you're going to learn one thing that you can do that will actually make a fairly profound difference. And if that doesn't, and this might cure it for you, you might actually be fine. But if not, for the rest, and as she's doing it, right, she's laying out, here's the thing, and here's how this fits into Ayurveda, and here's what Ayurveda is at least a high level, so that by the end they think, God, Ayurveda is very compelling. And same with the osteopathy. That this education can be happening that builds the credibility, not just in you, the practitioner, but in the modality itself, in the approach itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do also want to just put this out there that some people are very attached to the way they've always done things. And this current, we're recording this in the middle of a pandemic. This current reality is really challenging that because the way people have done things in many cases is just no longer available.
Yeah.
Um, and it creates an opportunity for us to get really creative and resourceful about how we get things done. And so I can share a little bit about how to think about how do you take something
Please.
online.
Yeah.
Because there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. The wrong way to do it is to say, this is what I would do in person. How do I do it online?
Totally. Right. Here's
That
how
is
to give
not going to
yourself
work.
a massage. This is the
Exactly,
and you
right.
push behind and yeah.
Like that isn't going to work. And it's not going to work because when we do something in person, right, there are pros and cons to an in-person experience, whether it's a physical modality, whether it's a learning experience, there are pros and cons to it. And we've kind of leaned into the pros and compensate for the cons. But if we take that and we try to just replicate it online, you lose all the benefits of being in person, but you replicate all the problems. So you get a poor man's version of what you were doing. But if instead you were to say, okay, in person, I would do this. What am I trying to accomplish by doing that? Then you ask yourself, what is another way that I could accomplish that? You could come up with some really interesting stuff. And I'll give you an example. So we run a big conference, hundreds of people who fly in from all over the world. And the last one happened 3 weeks after the shutdown. So we had to scramble to take this virtual very quickly. And it was quite an undertaking, and we managed to get it done. And my style of delivery is very interactive and very dynamic. So when I'm in the room with people, there's a lot of discuss with your neighbor. There's a lot of discuss with your table.
Yeah.
And you can't do that with 400 people on Zoom. And so I had to go one by one every time I were to say, discuss with your neighbor. All right, well, why would I say that right now? Right, in some cases, am I looking for a state change, right, to just get people's attention back?
Yeah.
In some cases, I'm looking for a deeper reflection on the subject matter. In some cases, I'm looking to create a feeling of connection with others so you're not isolated in what you're doing. And then in each case, like, well, what is a different way for me to do that?
Beautiful.
And you can come up with really creative, innovative stuff. You also realize that in some cases, the tool you were using is actually really not ideal, right? Some of the things you're trying to do, it's like, why do I do discuss with your neighbor or discuss with your table? Because when you have 400 people in a room, those are kind of your only options, right? You don't have alternatives because anything else would be chaos. So those are the two things you can do. So you can kind of reimagine what would this be. So case in point, and I'm not a massage therapist by any means, but if I were to say, if I were in person, I would massage their shoulder like this. So I'm going to tell you, reach your hand over, and like that's not going to work.
Right.
But if really what you're trying to do is, so you're identifying muscles, they need to be stimulated in certain ways, are there other ways to do that? And you actually can do interesting things with a home massage course that might involve rollers or Swiss balls or stuff like that,
Totally.
right? Because you're looking at what am I trying to accomplish? What is another way of doing that?
Yeah.
So that's kind of a way of thinking about it.
That's what I'm curious. You said there are pros and cons. What would you say are the pros and cons of live? Because I think that is the default. Is well, live is better.
That is the expectation, but that's a function of our frame of reference. And there's a really good byproduct of this current crisis and tragedy, which is that it's forcing people out of their comfort zones. So because most of the people who bought online courses for most of the history of the world of online courses have been these innovator early adopters who are relatively forgiving buyers, there's been a certain amount of laziness on the part of course creators to basically say, this is what a learning experience looks like in person. I'm going to create an approximation of that online, and here you go. And there are a lot of things that don't make sense to port over. So case in point, when we think about a course, we typically imagine a 45-minute or 60-minute or 90-minute session on a weekly basis. That has nothing to do with anything that we know about how learning works well. It just has to do with the fact that if you're doing a class in person, the teacher and the students all have to synchronize their schedules and be in the same place at the same time. And so that's a way for them to manage that, right? And sometimes these things that we take for granted, when you really dig into where did this come from, it's just ludicrous, right? Like so many people have this idea that the optimal size for a class, like a teacher to student ratio, is 25-1. This comes from Maimonides in the 12th century. And it's funny because he wasn't running a a typical classroom, even in the 12th century, right? So it's so not representative. So in terms of advantages and disadvantages, right? There are some great advantages to being in person, right? It is a very rich sensory transmission medium, right? They see you, they hear you, they smell you, there's the body language, and it's bidirectional, right? In the sense that you can see them too. They're not going to goof off on their phone if you're standing 10 feet away from them because you can see it, right? You have this amazing feedback channel. If something's not landing, you can adapt right there. And you have a functionally captive audience, right? And that allows you to get away with a bunch of things as an instructor. Now, online, you don't have these advantages, but you have some other really cool advantages. You have the benefit of, like, never mind accessibility and people can get to it when it's convenient. But, I'll actually give you a really good example. So at our event, we do coaching, one-on-one coaching. And it's really valuable to do that in person. But it's also a little bit distracting because I'm sitting across from the person I'm coaching, but there's a whole conference going on around us. Whereas online, it's me and you on Zoom, and there's nothing else. There's no distraction. Right? Here's another actually really good illustration is the Q&A. When I'm doing my event and I do Q&A from the stage, right? We pass a microphone along and I see them on the other end of the room. Whereas here it's like me to another person, one-on-one on Zoom. It's so much more intimate,
Right.
right? So there are a lot of things that you can do. You can mix and match groups in a way that's really interesting. On Zoom, you can have randomized breakouts,
Right.
right? You're going to be with a different 5 people each time. You can't do that every time you want to break a group in a room. It would be chaotic. So there are a lot of things that you can do, but if you start with, this is what I'm used to, how can I adapt it? It won't work. You've got to start with, what am I trying to accomplish? What is the best, most innovative, interesting way of getting that done?
Yeah, it strikes me that two other benefits. One is it can be asynchronous. So I mean, they can do
Mm-hmm.
it on their own time, and we all know sometimes you just, hey, I've got a weekend free. I want to dive in and just get it all done in one weekend. And with an online course, somebody could do that,
Mm-hmm.
and also that they and somebody might have no time, but then they can wait, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not, oh, I didn't miss the class. The class is still there. And the other one that occurs to me for a lot of people who are in the healing arts, especially if you're dealing with someone that's very emotionally sensitive, let's say there's one woman who's in my marketing for hippies one-on-one course right now. She is starting to focus. She does voice work, but she's starting to focus on women who've gone through sexual assault. And there's all these connections between the reproductive system and the throat and the voice, and so this is just very sensitive. And so saying, like, come to my workshop for women who've gone through this is, you could frame it as, or people who support them, so that you wouldn't know who is who. But still, it's a very vulnerable thing to do. There's a reason that all the Alcoholics Anonymous or
There's a
groups,
reason why they're anonymous.
yeah, they're anonymous and they're in the back of a church, so you can have,
Mm-hmm.
so the online courses can give a certain kind of anonymity for people if they want it. They don't have to turn on the video. They can
Yep.
type a fake name. So this is an immense benefit if you're working with something that's emotionally fraught.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. You touched on something really interesting in terms of the fact that it's asynchronous. You can do interesting things with semi-synchronous, but something you can do online that is very hard to do in person is that there are different kinds of content that require different degrees of focus. So Dan Pink wrote a great article about this a few years ago, referring to television content. But he was saying in that article that there are shows that he watches on an interstitial basis, meaning that 10 minutes while he's standing in line and 20 minutes on a plane. And then there are shows that are intentional, right? So there's the standing in line shows, then there's the couch shows, the shows you only watch when you're sitting on your couch with your spouse and your popcorn and no distractions. And in a learning experience, in an online course, there's going to be content that fits both of these paradigms, right? So, there is course content that you can totally go through it and listen to it while you're on your run or whatever it is. And let's save the intentional time for when you're doing the assignment, for when you're doing the work, for when you're applying. And it's very hard to be kind of judicious in how much of people's energy and attention you're taking when they're in the room.
Yeah. Now, by the way, how much more time do you have? Because I want to be respectful.
About 15 minutes.
Okay. What are the big, I don't know, objections, concerns that people have? Let's say it is a fit.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking with somebody and it's clearly it's the type of business. And in fact, something about their niche is like, adapt very well online.
Yep.
What are the big concerns or roadblocks that people face, or objections that come up for people around this?
Um, well, so one of them is around technology, and this is a very interesting time to be doing that, because the world has suddenly been flooded with people coming into this online space, and so there's been like a role reversal for a lot of people. Um, I was talking to someone just right before this call, and she was talking about a friend of hers who is not very technology savvy at all. Like she struggles with technology,
Yeah.
but she is the person who's guiding her whole family now in terms of how to get on Zoom and how, like, because there's hierarchies, right? There's the people who live and breathe technology, right? They're up here. There are the people who find it challenging and they're down here. And most of my students are down here and they look up at like people like me or you and they're like, I'm nowhere near there.
Yeah.
But now there's a whole new tier where there's most of the world now that is getting into the online space, which is down here. And these are the people who refer to it as, the Zoom. And they're like, how do I get on the Zoom? And so, all of a sudden, the people who I've worked with who tend to feel very insecure about their technology skills are like, no, actually, I know a lot more than most people who are getting into this space. So that's a very interesting shift. So that's a big one. Like, can I get my head around the technology?
Yeah.
Um, Another big concern that people have is just around how much time will it take, how much energy will it take. But this is a very opportune time. If you're at home and killing time, right now is a great time to get a leg up on this.
Yeah.
Um, let's see, what's another big concern or objection that people have? I don't know. What do you think would be a concern for people?
That's a good question. Um, yeah, I think the time, I think how much money is it going to cost to get this together, and make it look good. I think another concern would be, well, I don't have a fancy camera. It's not going to
Hmm.
look so pretty and sexy. And so people are going
Yeah, so let's speak to both of those. So in terms of and the camera thing is it's broader than that. The concern that people have is, I'm an expert in my field.
to, right.
What if I produce something that's not up to my standards? Will it cannibalize my credibility?
Mm,
And that's a legitimate concern if you're not following a good process. That's why it's really important to follow the kind of process that, I do outline in the book, and we have courses that guide people through it. Courses about courses. It's very meta, I know. Um, in terms of the cost, um, part of that is like mindset, and part of it is dollars. So because this has been very much this opportunistic, I want to make money online kind of thing, there has been a perspective that this is like a hobby kind of thing. I'm doing it on the
mm,
side. So I'll invest in my business after my business has made money.
yeah.
And of course, that's not how it works, right? Return comes after investment. So if someone decides this is what they need, like you do have to decide, I'm putting in the time, money, energy, resources to make it happen.
Yeah. Just to pause on that one, it's baffling to me. Somebody opens a restaurant. We know you're not going to make money for 3 years. This is
Hmm.
understood. Any kind of retail, anything. And yet somehow people get into the coaching or writing books or holistic healing, and there's this thought I'll be profitable tomorrow, and just probably not true.
Well, it's an artifact of history, right? Because go back 15 years when it was a completely open landscape and you didn't have to be very good or create something very good, but there was nobody else there
Yeah.
and the platforms were unregulated and unsaturated. You could make money very quickly, but that's not the reality of a mature landscape,
Yeah.
right? It's not, people ask me sometimes, is it like too hard now? Is it no longer doable? I'm like, no, it's just no longer unreasonably easy, right? It just requires a legitimate effort like any kind of business. Um, that said, it doesn't need to cost very much, right? What it takes to produce a good course is usually not what people think. So, the instructional design and the planning of what will be a great course and what will be valuable to my students
Mhm.
matters a lot more than any of the technology,
Yeah.
right? If you decide that you want to create, I want videos and I want all that kind of stuff, which I don't recommend for people with their first course, there are better ways to go.
Mhm.
But even if you say, okay, I need to produce some really good video, um, what it takes to produce that is usually not what people think. So the first thing they're like is, what is the camera I need? How many thousands of dollars should I spend on the camera?
Right.
And the camera doesn't matter, right? Like you can record really good video on $100 webcam, right? They're very high quality these days. The thing that does matter most if you want to produce good video is first actually the audio,
Mm.
right? Because the quality of like bad audio degrades what the feeling of the video is very fast.
Mhm.
And so, a $15 microphone is all you need if it's configured properly, but that's important. And the second thing that's important is lighting,
Yeah, sure.
right? And the third is maybe the camera angle. So if you go in that order, I'm going to spend $15 on a microphone. I'm going to spend maybe $100 on some good lights, and another $50 on a tripod, so I'm not getting the up your nose shot,
Yeah,
right? Like that's most of the way that you need to go to create good videos. So it you do need to invest a little bit, but it doesn't need to cost very much.
yeah, yeah, amen. And it's interesting on the technology piece. It's like, well, yeah, it's you're gonna learn, but then it's
Hmm.
this is not for most people who are concerned about technology. Yes, there is the grown zone of this. It's frustrating, it's new, but I just for anyone who's considering it, don't let that stop you. There's also a teenager in your life who already understands all this stuff. They'll teach you for free. Buy them a pizza. You'll get a tutorial on some of the basics on what the Zoom is, and the what were the other ones? The other concerns people have, the thing that stopped people was that how good they're going to look. There's that time. Oh yeah, the time thing. To me, this is so important. Whether it's an online course, whether it's an ebook, whether it's whatever it is you're creating, this is the whole thing about business model and scaling. Is once you've created it, it's there. I tell
Hmm.
people like, writing a sales letter. It's it takes so much time to write a sales letter. Yeah, but once it's there, it's there. Once
Yeah.
you've done your homepage, it's fucking there for years. Probably you don't need to make too many changes on it. So there is this short game versus the long game, and it's true. The long game, the sustainability of our business, there is an investment, whether it's time or money, whichever way you go. Of course, it's going to be an investment. And but to me, one of the big questions I put to people is this a hobby for you or is it a business? And if it's a hobby, probably don't,
Sure.
because why? But if you're taking it seriously at this point as a business and you want your income to come from it, of course, invest. So I guess one of my last questions would be, what do you see as the biggest mistakes people make when they go about creating an online course? Where do you see this all go wrong?
They take their assumptions as facts.
Hmm.
There's this great scene in the movie Inside Out. I have small children, so I'm kind of revisiting all the classics. But they're like walking through the mindscape of this girl Riley, and they bump into something, and two boxes fall over. Everything inside gets all mixed up, and one box is labeled opinions, and the other is labeled facts.
Oh,
And so they just shovel them back into the boxes randomly, and they're like, "I'm sorry, the opinions and facts got all mixed up." And he's like, "Yeah, that happens all the time, right?" Like we do the same kind of thing with our assumptions.
hmm,
So when you set out to create an online course, you have a series of assumptions in your head. You have assumptions around who's going to want it. You have assumptions around what they want to include. You have
hmm,
assumptions around what they're willing and able to pay. You have assumptions around what format of delivery will work for them. You have assumptions around where they're going to be challenged or stuck. And if you're an expert in your field, you're probably right about the majority of your assumptions,
yeah,
but you don't know which one you're wrong about. And so if you just take your assumptions as facts and you're like, all right, I'm going to spend 6 months, a year building out this great course,
oh my God.
and then it'll be great, it's probably not going to be great, right? You need to take a much more test and try and iterate and see how it goes. And there's a process for doing that. But
Well, I
yeah.
just want to give a shout out to this. Danny goes over, I think, a 6-step process of how to create a pilot program, or it's called a beta test, the minimum viable product. Try a tiny little experiment, uh, and I loved it. I just thought, oh man, I'm actually probably going to make a bunch of videos and just be quoting you and referencing you going through those 6 steps, because it's so important. People, yeah, the big place I see people screw up around niching and creating offers. Well, there's 2 places you can screw up, it seems. One is you try a bunch of stuff and you never reflect on it at all.
Hmm.
But the other is you're in your head designing the perfect thing. But then by the time, it'd be like, oh, there's that person I'm so attracted to. Oh, I'm gonna court them. But instead of just starting a conversation and building things in a natural, organic way, you get it. So I'm gonna court them. I'm gonna give them flowers. I'm gonna say this big dramatic speech, and out of nowhere, you show up on the front step, ring the doorbell, and just, "Hi, I've been staring at you for a while, and you're beautiful." It's crazy. But that's where crazy happens. People design these courses that seem like a great idea in their head, and then when they launch it to the market is just sort of, what? That's not what I want.
Hmm.
You miss the mark so fundamentally. So the need to have these conversations. Anyways, Danny goes over a really great process in this book. I recommend. Yeah. Are there any other blunders that you see are kind of the big egregious, like, God, don't, if you're going to, whether or not you work with Danny or not, what are the things that people should avoid?
Yeah, so this is like, it applies to course building, or it applies to kind of entrepreneurship in general. Um, I try to encourage my students to separate out what from how,
Mm,
right? When you try to do those things at the same time, like decide what you should do and how you should do it, what ends up happening is that what you can envision is constrained by the things that you feel like you are able to do right now.
mm,
And what you should be doing is like put aside feasibility, put aside what you know how to do, and start with what is the right move? What is the thing that if I get it done will be great for my business, great for my customers? And then you figure out how to make it happen. Um, it's funny. Most entrepreneurs have in their history some story of someone said, "Can you do this?" And they were like, "Sure," and then they go and figure it out, right? Like when you ask an entrepreneur that question, "Can you do this?" they hear it differently from most normal people. Normal people hear, "Can you do this?" and they interpret it to mean, "Is it within your capabilities right now?" And entrepreneurs hear that question, and what they're hearing is it plausible that you could figure it out between now and the time to deliver? And you need to kind of take that approach if you want to build something. Start with what should I be doing? And don't ask, do I know how to do it right now? The answer is probably no. You're probably doing already the things that you know how to do, and they're getting you the results you already have.
yeah.
But start with what is it that you should be accomplishing? And then ask yourself, is it plausible that I could figure this out? And if it is, then get to work.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. And you start out small. Again, Danny's recommendation, you just start tiny with a little test for a few people. See how it goes. Again, see if the thing you thought was going to work is going to work.
Hmm.
And 75% of the time, you're probably right. 25% of the time, you're dead wrong. And good to test that cheap without spending a lot of time and money. And God, investing. I mean, I've seen people, there's a woman in my mentorship program, and she invested so much in her website, and as we were talking, it just has become more and more abundant. The website is completely off and isn't really true to her. She says, but I just spent all this money. Don't make me change my whole website. So I'm trying to ease it. Well, we can go with that for a while, and while we work on this in the background, and eventually, the hammer's going to have to drop on her end. The penny's going to have to drop. Like, oh God, I just need to change this. But this is what happens when people, yeah, invest too much too soon. The maybe last quick wondering is, so I'm hearing in terms of online courses, because people might be thinking, wait, where does this fit in a business model? So I'm seeing that one place it could be is the kind of intro, the hey, get to know me and
Hmm.
my work, and here's some basics, and give you the
Yep.
context, my point of view, my framework and worldview and cosmology as it relates to a particular result. There's
Yep.
that. You could use it if you're doing a talk, and you say, hey, if you'd like to work with me more, here's a little
Hmm.
additional thing you can get. Here's a discount code or whatever, and
Yep.
people can then check it out and get to know you better. It could also be something you offer for free on your website or charge, but it could just be one of these, hey, um, you want to check me out? I get this is a hard thing to talk about, a hard thing to work on, but here's a free 10-day course or whatever, just to,
Hmm.
you could do that or charge a little bit. You could, I mean, it's a great thing if you're networking and you meet somebody who's a perfect fit. Maybe you charge for it, but it's like, this is such a good fit. Hey, I'm just going to send you this. And this could also deepen the credibility and trust. The relevance is already there, but now this deepens the credibility. And, you know, you start with generosity. Are there other places you can think where you've seen it fit in a business model?
Yeah. So we started talking about it and the conversation got diverted, but
Mm,
um, if you look at the life cycle of the customer, so there's the part before they become a customer, and it can essentially be a marketing assistance tool.
yeah.
It can be the core thing that they buy, right? The thing that they buy that your business is built around could be the course. It could be that you're selling something else, speaking, consulting, whatever, and the course is an add-on to that. It's the would you like fries with that that improves your margins and allows you to support people better. It could also be after sale, either as an addition, or it can be, now that you're paying me a whole bunch of money,
Yeah.
I want to make sure you're getting the most out of the experience. And rather than spending a ton of time with you regurgitating the same thing, I've created this course that's that much better. Go through it. So really it can fit into any part of the customer lifecycle.
Mm. Love it. Danny, thank you so much. So you have a course coming up, and I think you do it every year,
Hmm.
about helping people get online. So I want to hear you talk about that. But first of all, everyone, I just recommend if you're thinking about getting online, get this book, read it. Very useful, very compelling, step-by-step kind of sense of the broad strokes of how do you go online with this. But if you would be willing to share a few words about your course.
Yeah, sure. So this is actually a brand new program that we're
Oh,
rolling out. It kind of brings together the best practices we've learned and applied over, close to a decade of teaching people how to do this. It's called the Course Business Masterclass. It's actually only open for a very short window. But essentially everything you need to get your course built, launched, and then to scale the reach of your course to as many customers as you want is in there. Um, I'm sure Tad will have sent you, information and a link. So I would say click on those links, just check out what's there. It's only open for a short window of time when we do one of these enrollments. Um, and I hope to get to work with some of you.
boy, I hope so too. And for those of you who are interested, I haven't figured out exactly what the support I'm going to offer is, but I will be offering support to help you figure out your niche, because this is the big thing. And if you can start on that foot, just know there will be some very personal live support with me figuring out your niche. At least there will be a group call for everyone who signs up through me. But there may also be more for some of the first people to sign up. So anyways, I trust Danny. He's really brilliant on this. This is a very important part of the business model to have, especially if you've been relying on in-person, to have a more resilient business moving forward. I just think this is, really vital. Danny, thank you so much for your time. And good luck. I hope the launch goes well, and no doubt people will get a great deal from it.
Tad, thank you very much. Thank you to everyone who's been watching this. And look, there's never been a better time to teach your gift. So, let's do it.
Amen.